Today on Ag News Daily.
You know what? It worked over here, but it didn't work over here, right? And I don't know why. I just want to be done with it. I don't want to think about it. But we don't want that. So we put a lot of pride in educating our channel partners. Every single month we have agronomy training sessions.
Well, welcome back to the weekly edition of the Ag News Daily podcast. For those of you tuning in with us via video, you might see I'm on my own today. I've got a roast Tanner here. It's a Friday. We always record on Fridays. I called him this morning because we had a route issue with some roads closed, so I was calling him for directions, and he was in the field pulling anhydrous tanks. So no Tanner this week. I don't know how he forgot about the show. I'm sure he'd give me a little bit of guff if he was recording and I forgot. So we've got to do that for him. If you follow him on the X, give him a little something, teasing him about forgetting the day of the week. But speaking of X, I was locked out of my X account earlier this week. So if you follow me or if you saw some weird tweets from me, we've got that all fixed now. But a big week for us this week. We also saw National Ag Week this week. I was going to ask Tanner what he did to celebrate Ag Week this week, but I guess he was out pulling anhydrous tanks instead of being here on the podcast. So with all those fun things being said, though, we still have a great lineup of news, a special guest interview coming up with Secretary Vilsack, and a couple of interviews coming to us from Commodity Classic. So an action-packed show nonetheless. Starting things off here in the weather for this week, scattered showers, thunderstorms, and even snow swept across the Midwest this week, while precipitation has brought some relief to some drought-affected areas. Heavy rain has left soils saturated in parts of the east, complicating, of course, some field work and early planting. Looking ahead, some smaller systems are expected this weekend into early next week, bringing light showers to some areas. However, southwestern wheat regions are unlikely to see some of that much-needed rainfall. Strong winds may further stress winter wheat, keeping conditions less than ideal for crop development. In the extended forecast, temperatures from the Mississippi Valley eastward are expected to be near below normal, while warmer than average weather is anticipated in southern Florida along the northern Atlantic coast and up to the Pacific coast to the plains. We also, saw some snow here in central Iowa and across much of Nebraska as well, as we saw kind of a end-of-the-year blizzard, so maybe Eric Snodgrass's prediction of an April 4th blizzard may come true. This week, we also saw the National Pork Producers Council echoed their praise for the USDA's decision to make the new swine inspection system's increased line speed program permanent. National Pork Producers Council President Dwayne Statler, a pork producer from Ohio, says the move will provide financial security and stability for producers, adding that without the program, some could have faced losses of nearly $10 per head. Under the policy, the Food Safety and Inspection Service will extend waivers allowing pork and poultry plants to maintain higher speed lines to meet demand. However, not everyone is on board with this move. The retail, wholesale, and department store union representing thousands of meat packer workers criticized this decision. Union President Stuart Applebaum argues that increased speeds will jeopardize worker safety, stressing the need for additional staffing to ensure safe operations. And of course, this week it's National Agriculture Week, running March 16th through the 25th, with this year's theme, Together We Grow. The ag industry, of course, contributes over $9.5 trillion to the U.S. economy, according to the 9th annual Federal Economy Report released on National Ag Day, March 18th. The report measures the industry's impact on jobs, wages, and business taxes. However, Corn Refiners Association CEO John Bode notes that the ag sector's economic impact has declined from last year, reporting a $100 billion drop in output, with agriculture now making up 18.7% of the economy compared to 20% back in 2024. Despite these challenges, direct employment in food and agriculture has grown by over 1 million jobs since 2020. Additionally, on National Ag Day, Secretary Rollins announced the agency will issue up to $10 billion in direct payments through the Emergency Commodity Assistance Program. This program, authorized by the American Relief Act of 2025, will help farmers manage rising input costs and falling commodity prices. Applications will soon be available, with more information at fsa.usda.gov. This week also serves as a reminder to celebrate the dedication of farmers, ranchers, and producers. Rollins reflected on her own experience growing up in agriculture and participating in 4-H and FFA, and emphasized how the industry remains a way of life for many Americans. Of course, to celebrate National Agriculture Week, we're joined by a guest who has dedicated his career to advancing agriculture across the nation. Currently serving as the CEO of the World Food Prize Foundation, Governor and former USDA Secretary Tom Vilsack is no stranger to agricultural leadership. Let's dive into that conversation now. Well, as we mentioned, we're very honored today to have a special guest with us to celebrate National Agriculture Week. He probably needs no true introduction, but Secretary Vilsack, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
It's great to be with you today.
Secretary Vilsack, you've had some big career changes here over the last few months. I want to get to that here in a bit. But first, let's talk about the importance this week of National Agriculture Week with the theme, Together We Grow. What does that mean to you being a former Secretary of Agriculture, Governor of Iowa, and just champion for agriculture?
Well, it's an opportunity, obviously, to put the spotlight on true American heroes, the farmers, the ranchers, the producers of this great country that have created a strong America because we are a food secure nation. Every day, those farmers, ranchers, and producers go out and regardless of the market situation or the weather situation, they continue to produce and they continue to provide us the security of being able to feed ourselves. I think oftentimes we take this for granted, and we should never take it for granted. We should be celebrating these folks every day and every week. But it is nice to have a week that's dedicated to an acknowledgement of the contribution that these folks make. These are farmers that are not only providing us food and fiber and fuel, but now they're also providing us power. Many farmers embracing renewable energy opportunities and putting that renewable energy to work for our friends and neighbors in rural America. These same farm families send their sons and daughters into the military in disproportionate numbers, so they make a contribution to the national security of our country in that respect. So this is, really a significant number of really great people. And, obviously it's a challenging time for farmers and ranchers. And for many, many farmers, virtually every time is challenging. So I think it's important for the country to recognize the contribution and to make sure that the policies and the decisions we make in government, in the private sector, in the nonprofit sector, understand and appreciate and acknowledge the importance that we should place on farmers, ranchers, and producers.
Yeah, as we think about this National Ag Week in particular, we're in a commodity down cycle, which happens every so often. So it's nothing unusual per se, but certainly producers might be feeling some things that are not so positive, or maybe they have questions about what to look forward to or maybe what to keep them going. Do you have any advice or outlook there?
Well, I think it is important for folks to understand the challenge. Roughly 90% of farm families, even in the best of times, require off-farm income in order to be able to keep the farm and to be able to stay on the farm and to do what they love to do. So this is a system that obviously needs more assistance and more help. And one of the things I think we should be focusing on is trying to create ways in which farmers get paid not just for what they grow, but how they grow it and where they grow it. I think there are opportunities to create additional revenue streams for farms so that when the commodity prices are not as strong as they need to be, maybe that farmer's receiving a payment from the REC because they're selling excess energy to the grid, or maybe that farmer's receiving an ecosystem service market payment because they're doing something that's helping to reduce greenhouse gas emissions or carbon sequestration being sequestered in their soil. Or maybe they're figuring out ways to convert their agricultural waste into a multitude of new products for the American economy that are less reliant on fossil fuels. The idea here is to create a stream of revenue so that farmers are getting not one or two checks in the mail, but multiple checks. So that's one aspect. I think the other aspect is that we need to continue to focus on investing in the rural infrastructure and making sure that small manufacturing opportunities are made available in these small towns so that those jobs are available to farm families if they need to supplement the income. So I think the strategy here that we ought to be thinking about it at the local level, the state level, the federal level, is how do we create additional revenue streams in addition to strengthening markets. Obviously, we're incredibly productive. The world needs what we produce, and we need to continue to figure out ways in which we can create market opportunities here at home and around the world.
And it sounds like you might have the opportunity to help strengthen relationships with other countries. Now, with your new role as CEO of the World Food Prize, you're just stepping into that role. But what are some of the goals you have with your time there at World Food Prize?
Well, I think it's an opportunity for folks to understand outside of the state of Iowa, which is proud to host the World Food Prize award ceremony in October, that this is a foundation that does more than just award the equivalent of a Nobel Prize to individuals and organizations that are advancing the cause of global food security. Look, we've got 733 million people in the world today that are food insecure. 1 in 10 out of every person on the face of the earth is malnourished. We have 60 million children who are stunted under the age of 5 years old because they don't have proper nutrition. 85% of the areas of the world that are in conflict are also food insecure areas. So there is a significant opportunity for farmers and ranchers and producers in the United States and around the world to impact and affect and to provide a more peaceful world. We just need to figure out how to make that connection. We need to figure out how to make farmers around the world more productive. We need to figure out innovation and technology that is available to smallholders, farmers, not just here in the United States, but around the world. So the World Food Prize is really just dedicated to trying lifting up this idea of global food security and nutrition security. Just recently, we had a letter signed by 153 Nobel laureates and World Food Prize laureates, basically a call to action, suggesting that we really needed to step up and accelerate our production globally if we were to meet this challenge. So an awareness, raising the awareness around the world of the challenge. It's also an opportunity for us to inspire the next generation of young people. We are very interested in our youth institutes. They're functioning in 20 states across the country over the next several months. And we bring young people, we challenge them to think about global food security in a particular country. How would they solve it? We take the brightest and the best of that group and we bring them to Des Moines. During the World Food Prize ceremony. They get to rub elbows with the great scientists and researchers and policy leaders in the world. And over 70 countries were invited last year, and we expect and anticipate that number will continue to grow. So these young people have an extraordinary opportunity. And then the best of the best are given opportunities potentially to be researchers with some of the great researchers around the world. So it's an opportunity to inspire the next generation. And frankly, the other thing we're trying to do is to convene people. We're trying to bring people together to have a conversation about these big issues. We're having a dialogue next week in Washington, D.C., where we're inviting several hundred folks to have a conversation. We'll be traveling to India in September to have a similar conversation. So a lot of activity going on. We want to broaden the scope and awareness of the World Food Prize. And I know this is a long answer, but we're just doing a lot, right? We have an Innovation for Impact Challenge. We're providing a $50,000 cash award to somebody who's providing a significant innovation in agriculture. The deadline for submissions of nominations for that award is April 15th. We are looking at ways in which we can also focus on issues involving hunger at home. We have a hunger summit every year in Iowa in the summer, and we take that opportunity to sort of identify somebody who's really moved the dial, if you will, on addressing hunger here at home. Deadline for nominations of that also April 15th. So a lot going on at the World Food Prize.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and looking forward to seeing what you do in your role as the CEO of World Food Prize.
Well, it's really just a continuation of what I've been doing for the last 30 years, which is to be a spokesperson and a champion for these great people that we celebrate this week. And I would just encourage every American, you know what, not this week, not a special week, not a special day. How about every day? Every time you go to the grocery store, just thank the farmer because you are blessed to have the choice. And really, even with the tough times, the affordability, if you look at other people around the world, they spend a heck of a lot more for their food than we do. And the reality is that frees up us for a lot of different things that we can spend our money on. So farmers just they make our lives a lot better. So we really should celebrate them every day.
Well, again, a big thank you there to Secretary Vilsack. It will be interesting to see what he does in his time at the World Food Prize. But while we're looking at a global picture, let's take a look this week at where tariffs are currently sitting. After a series of tariffs and countermeasures went into place, of course, from the U.S. on Canada, Mexico, and China, American Farm Bureau Federation economist Becky Resnick says agricultural products are starting to face the consequences. Currently, there's a 20% tariff, of course, on all Chinese products in effect, which has been implemented in 2 stages. While the U.S. paused the tariffs on Canada and Mexico for U.S.-compliant products until April 2nd, Canada's retaliatory tariffs remain in place and have expanded in response to U.S. steel and aluminum tariffs. Resnick notes that China has also imposed, of course, retaliatory tariffs, impacting about $21 billion worth of U.S. agricultural goods. That specifically impacts our poultry, cotton, corn, and wheat industries, along with sorghum, soybeans, pork, beef, fruits, vegetable, and dairy. Canada has also applied a 25% tariff on about $5.8 billion worth of agricultural products like wine, fresh fruits, poultry, and dairy. Looking ahead here, the next major development will for sure come on April 2nd when the U.S. plans to announce their reciprocal tariff strategy. Additionally, the European Union is set to implement some retaliatory tariffs as well in response to U.S. steel and aluminum measures. Time will only tell where things head from here. As U.S. egg prices continue to soar, the Department of Agriculture has reached out to Denmark and other European countries to explore the possibility of importing eggs to meet the demand. The move follows record-breaking wholesale egg prices driven by an acceleration of bird flu. This request comes amid heightened trade tensions, and President Trump has imposed, of course, new tariffs on the European Union. But in response to the egg crisis, Representative Josh Riley of New York and Dusty Johnson of South Dakota have introduced a bipartisan bill, Lowering Egg Prices Act. The bill aims to reduce prices by eliminating regulations that currently force farmers to discard millions of eggs each year. Under new federal rules, farmers must refrigerate all eggs after they are laid, without differentiating between table eggs and breaker eggs, which are pasteurized and used in processed food like cake mix and salad dressing. Lawmakers say this change could prevent the waste of nearly 400 million eggs annually, helping to bring relief to consumers at the grocery store. And I certainly know, shopping at the grocery store, we're a big egg household. We could certainly use some reprieve there. Well, as we think about companies looking for innovative ways to partner with farmers, enhancing soil health is one of the many focuses for ag partners. This week, we're playing a conversation we had at this year's Commodity Classic with the Director of Agronomy, Brandon Miners, at Midwestern BioAg. Let's get into that interview now. Folks, we are so excited to be wrapping up Commodity Classic this year with Brandon Miners, the Director of Agronomy from Midwestern BioAg, chatting about fertilizer, your background. You've got such an interesting story I can't wait to dig into, Brandon. But thanks for joining us on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So, Brandon, I want to get to who Midwestern BioAg is, but you have such an interesting and unique connection to the company. Let's start there.
Yeah, so for the last about 15, 20 years, I've been an independent agronomist in southeastern Minnesota as part of a family-owned business that my dad started about 35 years ago. He was one of the very first independent dealers for Midwestern BioAg. So when I came onto the family business, it was great because we had long-term customers already, 20-year-long customers that I got to experience the products, the education, the service behind it, and the relationships that were developed from that, right? That was kind of a big focus of our family business, and still to this day. And so to see the transformations that were happening on those farms from, a soil standpoint, soil health, plant health, livestock health, right? And ultimately profitability. These growers were at a point where, their farm profits were, the stress of that was gone, right? So very unique from that standpoint.
Yeah, that is. And I thought you were going to go back and talk about the athlete you were in college when you said he had a unique past. And here he's got actual experience that applies to the conversation we're having today.
Right.
So who is Midwestern BioAg?
Yeah, so Midwestern BioAg, we're a 40-year-old company. It was started by Gary Zimmer, and I want to focus on him a little bit. So he's known worldwide as like the father of biological agriculture. When he founded the company 40 years ago, he's a farmer himself. Actually, he's a dairy nutritionist by trade. That was he was actually a professor in college. And what he was looking at is how could we increase like forage quality for livestock, right? And looking at the traditional fertilizers that were available, he wasn't happy with them. He wanted something that was better, that had, let's say, better nutrient release curves, less harmful to soil biology. That was a big part of it. And the way he looked at it is that the soil itself is a ruminant, right? So he understood dairy cows and being a ruminant and how to feed those. And then he looked at the soil as the same exact principles, right? So how do we feed the soil in a way that provides the most production out of the soil, right? And from that standpoint, he started to introduce some new fertilizers in the industry, and he has been an innovator from day one. And so Midwestern BioAg has been responsible for numerous fertilizer innovations. We started as a dry fertilizer company and just introducing some of those. So an example is like differentiated potash sources, right? So instead of just the traditional potassium that we have available, potassium sulfate, for example, K-Meg, things like that. Polycoated urea was introduced by us and educated in the industry, and now it's on millions of acres. And so we've continued to innovate as an organization over the 40 years to where we are today with some of the most advanced fertilizers available.
I want to talk more about some of those advancements in innovation, but I just think it's really interesting, as you mentioned, Gary, being the father of regenerative agriculture before it really was a buzzword in the industry. And you've gotten to see a lot of that journey with your family's business and just your background with agronomy. In those last 15 years that you've served as an independent agronomist, you about 2 years, right, at Midwestern BioAg? Is that right?
About a year and a half.
Okay.
Yep.
What made you decide to make that jump? And what was it about Gary's outlook on regenerative agriculture that really struck a chord with you?
Yeah, so first and foremost, Gary has been a mentor of mine for the last 20 years, right? And I have to just give him props for that because he took the time to come over and personally train me, educate me, and build that passion that, I got it from my father also, but he was like that second almost father, right? And so that began like this passion inside me, right? And the reason that passion built is because of actually seeing the impact to the growers, right? We talk about like fertilizers today in the year one ROIs, right? And that's great because growers need to think about that from an economic standpoint, right? And that's understandable. But where Midwestern BioAg really differentiates itself and what really built this for me was seeing the long-term impacts where soil is actually changing, right? We talk about like taking a sand soil and building topsoil, right? Building black topsoil on it, changing CECs and all these kind of things to a point where it becomes a resilient system. And in a resilient system, what we see is it manages stress, right? Like plants can handle drought conditions, they can handle too much water, these kind of things. And instead of having a complete disaster year, which most people will experience, they can actually maintain yields through that kind of experience. And so that just really drove me to going, okay, well, we're making like actual tangible changes for these farmers that are impacting long-term impacts on their farms. So,
yeah, I appreciate how much energy you have, and you can see that the passion started before you joined the team.
Yeah.
So is Midwestern BioAg regional, or where's the service?
So for the most part, we're in the Midwest, right? So from like the Plain States, to I would say like Michigan, Ohio, that kind of area. But we have now expanded nationwide. Our biggest impact is mainly here in the Midwest, just because we have our locations in Minnesota, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Michigan. But we have channel partners that we work with all over the country. And so, as like we talked about earlier, is like regenerative ag and the buzzword and these kind of things. We see it at Commodity Classic right now, and all the companies are kind of getting on board with biology and carbon-based fertilizers. Well, we see our impact growing in all these areas, and especially in areas where we have like soils that are not northern Iowa soils, right? Where they have challenges, they have drought, they have high salinity soils. That's where we were really seeing huge impacts from our products.
So let's talk more about the product lineup that you guys are exhibiting here at Commodity Classic. You've got BioCal, TerraNew, which is probably one our listeners may have heard of, and the newest one, BioGel.
Yeah.
Give us the rundown of how those three products work together.
Yeah, so BioCal, let's start with that because that's the foundation kind of the company. When Gary first started the company, he was actually looking at calcium sources and how they impacted forage quality, right? So with alfalfa, for example. And, when he went out there and he noticed that if you applied, let's say, gypsum as a soluble calcium source and they took a feed sample, you saw increase in nutrients across the board. It wasn't just calcium that was being increased, right? So that kind of led down the road of, well, what other calcium sources are there available, right? Is there better ones? And he didn't find better ones. And so he decided he wanted to create one. And so he created BioCal. And what's really unique about BioCal is that it goes through a heating process that actually changes the calcium into a very soluble calcium source, okay? It's very reactive in the soil. And it's an amendment, okay? So it's a bulk spread amendment. But what you see is physical changes to your soil. I talked about this earlier, where like we actually see these tangible physical changes, more air and water infiltration, right?
You may not maybe see ROI year one, but you're going to see physical changes year one.
Yeah, you're going to see physical changes. Like growers notice even after like just 2 years when they go out and they till their fields, like their equipment pulls easier, right? Like so that happens. But even like I'll say this, we do see especially on forage crops, year one ROIs, absolutely. When it's on corn and soybeans, it might just pay for itself, but it's the long-term benefit of using that product, right? And so, I like to say this a lot in the industry, right? So, like, we see specialty products all over. And I've been in this industry long enough to know and see specialty products come in and then they leave, right? And whatever else. So, BioCal is a specialty product that has lasted the test of time, 40 years. And now it is growing rapidly across the country. And so it's really unique from that standpoint. So,
okay, got us off track. So we've talked BioCal. Let's talk TerraNew.
So TerraNew. All right. So TerraNew is
I was going to call it BioNew. I'm glad you said TerraNew.
Yeah. So TerraNew, I get excited about this because this is like the most technologically advanced dry fertilizer this industry has ever seen. And I can say that kind of boldly because we don't really, over the last 30, 40, 50 years, we don't really see very much advancements in dry fertilizer. You see it all the time in liquid fertilizer, right? But in dry fertilizer, you might have we went from urea to polycoated urea. We went from, let's say, we introduced better potassium source or something like that. But what this is we take dairy manure that's gone through a digester, okay? And when it's through the digester process, we take that dairy manure, we actually take your raw minerals that all the farmers out here are commonly using, okay? We finally crush it into a powder, we mix it with that dairy manure, we regranulate it into a high premium quality dry fertilizer. And what that really does is it keeps those nutrients plant available for longer in the season. It prevents the tie-up, the leaching, all the issues that we see today and that we're hearing about. And on top of that, it's a premium handling product. This is what's amazing that we're getting feedback from our growers. It's non-corrosive to equipment. It is non-abrasive, so it doesn't wear out tubes and precision agriculture and all those things. And right now it's our fastest growing product.
And then lastly was BioGel. And then I promise I'll let you ask some questions again too.
Yeah.
BioGel, you've launched it here commercially at Commodity Classic. What's this product?
Okay, so BioGel is really unique. And I got to give some props to Chris Niffen, our director of research. He's the one that invented it for us here. And
first of all, I have to say, when I think of gel and my farm equipment, you're talking about how non-abrasive the other is. I'm sitting here going, I can't wait to hear about this product.
So we'll touch on that because the name itself might cause a little hiccup for people, and I understand. So BioGel was created with the intentions of trying to bring a product into the marketplace that actually mimicked basically root exudates. Okay, so if we think about root exudates, it's that slimy substance that's around the roots. That's where nutrient exchange happens. That's where water holding happens, all those kind of things. And so what we see with that is it's organic acids, it's carbohydrates, right, that interact with the soil profile. So this product was created. It's fully food-grade ingredients, fully biodegradable, and it's really about nutrient retention. So you can pair it with your liquid in-furrow starter. You can pair it with UAN is a fantastic fit for it. So when we do that, those nutrients that we're applying, they get stabilized in the soil, right? They get held longer, keeps them more plant available longer. It kind of prevents all the tie-up issues that we see with commonly used fertilizers. But what really makes it unique is that there's a water retention to it, right? So if we look at water retention products available in the industry today, they're all basically polyacrylamides. They're plastic-based, right? And we're seeing a lot of issues with that in the soils and the long-term negative effects from it, right? So to have a water retention product that's not just water retention, it adds as biostimulant, a nutrient holding capacity, all this kind of stuff, and fully biodegradable, it really stands out across the board of anything in the industry.
Wow, I'm glad that you clarified, right? And it's neat to see how your suite of products now can really benefit a grower. Do you have, as part of the team, the way to make recommendations to the listeners or somebody that's curious about using them?
Yeah, so our company, we work through channel partners, right? Independent family-owned businesses. And one of the things that our company is really unique, what Gary founded, is that we're an education company. All right, so it was never about selling just products, right? It was about management, predicting success with the products, making sure they're placed well, and there was this huge emphasis on making sure that the dealers that are carrying our products, when they go out to the grower, that they are representing the brand, the products to the best ability. They're placing it in a place where that farmer is going to achieve success with it, right? And we all want to sell products in this industry, right? All of us do. But the thing is we don't want to just sell a product to sell a product, right? Because at some point that farmer's going to say, you know what, it worked over here, but it didn't work over here, right? And I don't know why. I just want to be done with it. I don't want to think about it. Well, we don't want that. So we've put a lot of pride in educating our channel partners. Every single month we have agronomy training sessions for our channel partners, making sure that they know how to go out, make placements, and then if they have questions, we have a whole team of people that make sure that we are there to support, boots on the ground, all those aspects.
Brandon, before we let you go, if any of our listeners tuning in want to learn more about Midwestern BioAg, where's the best place to go to do so?
Well, MidwesternBioAg.com. We just, we had a whole full brand refresh here and new website. I mean, it should be much easier for growers to actually access our materials, our research, because that's really been an emphasis lately is the quality and integrity behind our research and what we're bringing to growers. So they can find us on the website, and that's probably the best place to go for now.
Perfect. Well, Brandon, we certainly appreciate you joining us on the podcast.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, again, a big thank you there to Brandon for joining us on the podcast. What a fun conversation. As we wrap up the show this week with some market headlines, tensions are rising in the Middle East, but maybe cooling in the Black Sea region. President Trump earlier this week initiated strikes on Houthi rebels, causing concern about the oil outlook. Meanwhile, President Trump and President Putin had a long phone call earlier this week to discuss possible options for a peace agreement in Ukraine. President Trump said in a statement afterward, it would likely begin a 30-day ceasefire, which Ukraine has already agreed to in previous discussions, but the Kremlin has yet to confirm that as well. Export sales this week saw a 5-week high for corn, coming in at 58.9 million bushels of old crops sold and about 2.4 million bushels of new crop sales. Soybean sales, however, were disappointing this week, coming in at just 13 million bushels, well below trade expectations. Corn saw a boost on Thursday in addition to some strong export sales in anticipation of maybe tariffs being lifted on Mexico long term. News that the leader of the Sinaloa cartel was detained in Mexico provided some speculation that this would be a make-good for President Trump to lift tariffs altogether. That would be, of course, supportive for our corn market, as Mexico is the largest U.S. corn importer by far. And in the bigger economy, the Federal Reserve this week held interest rates steady after their meeting. But policymakers expect to see 225 basis point rate cuts by the end of 2025, steady with previous expectations. Well, that does it for news and headlines this week. Thanks again for tuning in with us. You can find us on all major social media sites and watch us on YouTube. Until next time, we'll talk to you then.